the wrong place for you. I tend to think we'll learn a lot here. All righty. So before we are in here for too much longer, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Olivia Nelson. I do professional development at Screencastify. Before I came to Screencastify, I was an educator for about a decade. I taught and I was an administrator. Probably all of the roles wouldn't fit here. So it's third grade math because that's where my heart is. And then I did curriculum development for a number of years after that. So I'm really excited to help you guys get the most out of video-based learning and make sure that it's meaningful for you. If you wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves in the chat box, who you are, what you teach, what your role is if you're not a teacher. It'll be super helpful as I go through today to sort of make sure that I speak to all of the variety of experiences we have with us. So if you're just now joining, we're dropping our introductions in the chat box, who you are, what you teach, if you're not a teacher, what your role is, so that I can make sure to speak to your actual experiences today. Cool. Great. Cool. All right, y'all. I will tell you very honestly that my teaching experience maxes out after United States middle school. So I will use examples from my personal experience, but hopefully you'll be able to identify with them. Again, the content isn't what's as important today as sort of the functionality that I'll show you and the sorts of things that you can do with video in the classroom. All right, y'all. So we will start by talking about the tenets of an effective assessment. I will be very honest in saying that I do not believe in assessing kids just to do it, right? So I really want to make sure we're thinking about what is going to make an assessment effective rather than just giving one. And then we'll talk about gathering assessment evidence with interactive questions. We'll not finish, but we'll move on to talking about students demonstrating their learning through video. So those first two parts will be mostly about us creating videos. The next part will be about students creating videos. And then the end there, we'll talk about feedback and student participation with video. I'll be very honest in saying that feedback can have a tendency to feel punitive instead of constructive. And so we'll address that in the final portion of the presentation. I'm going to stop sharing for a second just in case there are any questions, and then we will move right along. All right, I don't see any questions yet, so we'll keep on trucking. All righty. So if you have questions or ideas about anything, drop them in the chat box. I will give you a chance during the presentation to make sure you play around with Screencastify yourselves. So especially for those of you that were like, I don't even know what it is, not a problem. You will certainly learn before the end of today. And then this won't be too painful. We have about 50 minutes, not even, left together. Oh no, we have about 50 minutes left. And then I will let you go on your merry way, whether you love it or you hate it. So let's start here with the tenets of an effective assessment. I'd be curious before I tell you what the research says, and I'll type this question in the chat box so that you can see it. So what would you say makes an assessment effective, right? I said we're not giving them just to give them. So what's going to distinguish an effective assessment from an ineffective one? Go ahead and drop your answers in the chat box. There are no right or wrong answers with me, so don't be shy. Just curious about your thoughts, and then I will tell you what the quote unquote experts say. And I put those folks in quotes because I think you guys are just as expert as they are. Totally. It's tied to a specific outcome. Any other thoughts? And just so you guys know, I'm going to ask a bunch of stuff in the chat box. So if you're not warmed up yet, I totally understand, but you might want to get warm because this won't be the last one. Yep. Allowing different ways to show understanding. I really, really like that one because what that gets at is making sure that we're actually assessing the skill that we're trying to, right? And I know that a lot from being a third grade math teacher because I would give word problems all the time. And then when we go to analyze the data, a lot of the time it's like the issue that we're seeing is that the kids can't decode the problem. Their reading skills were not high enough. So then I didn't actually end up assessing the math skills. And so offering those other alternative ways to assess those skills is a really, really important point, because some of those students might have really fully understand the mathematical reasoning portion of it, and the reading was the only challenge standing in their way, right? So I really like that comment, Joanne. Thanks for sharing. And then Sandra, it guides and shapes the learning, right? So here's where you get to see why I said put those expert people in quotes, because you will see that we identified pretty much the exact same thing as them, because we are experts as they are too. So teachers making adjustments to teaching and learning in response to assessment evidence. So that is almost word for word what we just said. It guides and shapes the learning, right? We're not just willy-nilly doing things, we're reacting in response to this assessment evidence. Students receiving feedback. We'll talk about this in a moment. But basically, I think that we can actually relate this back to it being tied to a specific outcome, right? Because if we want a particular outcome and we're assessing students for that outcome, we have to eventually give them some feedback to get to that outcome, right? If they haven't reached it yet, we have to provide them with sort of the steps or the scaffold to get there. And then the last one, which, like I said, we'll talk about at the end, is student participation in the process. So this involves sort of revision of work and all of those processes that students can engage in for self-assessment purposes. All right, y'all. So let's start at the beginning with number one. And interestingly, I've bolded part of that sentence, but I'm actually not going to focus on the part that's bolded. So here it says that teachers make adjustments to teaching and learning in response to assessment evidence. And what we'll focus on first is this assessment evidence piece. So how do we get evidence from assessments? And in specific, because we're here today to talk about video, how do we do it with video? So let's chat. We're going to gather assessment evidence with video. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for 1 second. And what I'll ask now is, and I'll be very honest, that regardless of what you pick, it will be probably like a fourth grade example. So like, a 9-year-old. But let's decide whether we want to do social studies or reading. And I will be very honest in saying that if you guys pick social studies, you'll be undergoing a United States Bill of Rights social studies lesson. So your choice, drop it in the chat box, reading or social studies, and then we will go on our merry way. I'll give you about 20 seconds. If you don't vote, then these 4 folks who have voted get the say. Which is totally fine. Don't feel compelled. If you don't care, that's fine too. Uh-oh. 10 seconds and we're almost at a tie. Dun, dun, dun. All right, Joanne broke the tie. Let's go ahead for reading. So, all right, y'all. Now I have to share my entire screen or else you won't be able to see what I am doing. So, all right. Now, the trick here with Google Meet that I've learned is that I can't see you and my shared screen at the same time. So if anybody could come off mute and let me know, yes, that you can see the story and the extension that I have open on my screen. I know the story's a little small.
We can see it. Would you make it 150%?
Yeah, so I'm gonna the story, I want it to all be on the same page, but we can talk about zooming in the video. So I'm gonna try to keep it if I zoom in any farther than this, then I have to like scroll down, and I have something blocking. Oh wait, no, I can mute that. There we go. Okay, perfect. Is this bigger? Can everyone see this now? This is a little better.
Yep, we're good.
Okay, great. Thank you for letting me know that you needed to zoom in. All right, y'all. So I am going to first make some decisions about what I'm recording. So I did have a couple folks in the beginning who were brave and said, Olivia, I have no idea what Screencastify is. So it would be unfair of me to jump straight into recording without telling you a little bit about that. So right here, I have the Screencastify arrow next to my address bar. And so Screencastify is a Google Chrome extension that allows you to record your screen or your webcam or some combination of both. So you can make instructional videos, or in this case, assessment videos for your kiddos. When you open the extension, you'll have a ton of choices to make about what you're recording, so you can really customize it to your students' needs. First, you'll decide browser tab, desktop, or webcam. The browser tab recording limits us to just this tab. The desktop recording allows us to switch between tabs or show something else on our computer. And the webcam is like us talking to the camera confessional style, like we are on Google Meet, right? In this case, I'm reading this story. It's in this one browser tab, so that will work for me. I'm reading a story, so I'm certainly going to keep this microphone toggled on. I find that my facial expressions help my students to understand when I'm reading. So I'm actually going to embed my webcam while I'm reading this story. I'll click show more options. I keep this countdown enabled at all times because I just need a couple seconds to get ready. And then I'm going to turn on these drawing tools so that you guys can see some of the cool stuff we can do while we record. I'm going to leave tab audio turned off. The only reason for that is that I don't have any sound coming from my computer. So if you had a song or another video that you're wanting to include, you could turn this on and capture that. Okay. All right, y'all. I'm going to go ahead and click record. All right, so first thing I did down here is click the pause button. I'm a chronic pauser. That is my confession to you. It extends my countdown longer than 3 seconds. I also use it in the middle of recordings all the time just to make sure that I know exactly what I'm saying to my students at any given moment. We can collapse this drawing toolbar, expand it as you just saw me do. We can move it around so that it's not blocking anything on the screen. We can actually also do this with the webcam. I like, if when possible, like a lot of times if I'm doing poetry and the poem fits on one page, then I can move my camera up so that I'm right next to the poem, because otherwise sometimes students are having trouble deciding whether to look at me or what I'm reading, right? In this case, because it's not on one page, if I put my camera here, when I scroll, I'll end up blocking some of the text. So I'm going to leave myself down in the corner instead. In terms of the tools on the drawing, one other thing, we can make this, we can make this bigger and smaller as well. We can also toggle to a different camera. So if you're using a document camera or an external web camera, you can always get to it down there. These tools up here, let's talk about the mouse. First, we have the click mouse. Notice there's a red circle around anything that I'm clicking on. This is really great if you're trying to show students how to navigate somewhere on the computer, a new website, an assignment, how to do something, because they can see exactly what you're clicking on as you're talking them through the process and recording your screen. The focus mouse, which we'll use today, is sort of like a spotlight. The cool thing about this focus mouse is you can make it bigger or smaller with the up and down arrows on your keyboard. And so as I do my read aloud today, I'm actually going to use a pretty small spotlight and follow along as I'm doing my reading so that my students can see exactly where I am at any given point. I will warn you, you saw that on my slide was third grade math, not reading. So if my cursor speed does not exactly match my reading speed, please forgive me. The fireworks mouse allows us to show excitement. Also, when we give feedback to students later in the session, fireworks are a great way to let them know something that we're proud of, right? The pen tool, the stickers allow us something similar, right? We can show excitement, place them next to things to let kids know how they're doing. The pen tool allows us to circle, draw arrows, underline, really annotate in any way that we want with all of these different colors. And then the rectangle tool allows us to make rectangles. I'm going to jump back over to Google Meet for just a second in case there are any questions you want to drop in the chat box before I resume my recording. It's very meta looking at all of the ourselves and ourselves and ourselves. All right, y'all, I'm going back. If you have a question, please feel free to drop it and I'll get to it in a minute. All right, here we go. Hey, y'all, I am so excited to be reading one of my favorite stories to you today. Remember, no matter what kind of text we're reading, we always want to start with the title. So the title of this is The Ants and the Grasshopper by Aesop, and it comes from a book called Aesop's Fables. So let's go ahead and read. One thing I'll point out is that this smiley face is not going to interfere with the text, right? So it goes our drawing tools inject actual code in web pages. And so that smiley is now sitting where it is. It's not going to get in the way as I scroll. Okay. All right. One bright day in late autumn, a family of ants was bustling about in the warm sunshine, drying out the grain they had stored up during the summer, when a starving grasshopper, his fiddle under his arm, came up and humbly begged for a bite to eat. "What?" cried the ants in surprise. "Haven't you stored anything away for the winter? What in the world were you doing all last summer?" "I didn't have time to store up any food," whined the grasshopper. "I was so busy making music that before I knew it, the summer was gone." The ants shrugged their shoulders in disgust. "Making music, were you?" they cried. "Very well, now dance." And they turned their backs on the grasshopper and went on with their work. There's a time for work and a time for play. Wow, I noticed that this sentence at the bottom is italicized and it's all by itself. So I'm going to put a red rectangle around it because I think it might be important. And then I can go ahead and click stop. And my recording opens in a new tab. It saves automatically to my Google Drive. One thing I'll point out is that right now it's saved as this random title. So I can just jump in here and change the title so that I can better find it later. All right. Any questions about that before I jump in to the editor? Feel free to drop them in the chat box if you got any. Okay, cool. So, give me just a second. Okay. So, I'm going to use the same exact video of me reading this story. It's just from a little bit of a different day. So forgive me for wearing a different outfit when I reshare my screen. All right, so here we are, and I'm going to click Open in Editor, and this will allow me to open up in Screencastify Edit. So down at the bottom, you'll see that the story has appeared, and we can add some changes here. First thing I want to do here is think about adding some text. So in addition to this being a way for me to grab some assessment evidence, which don't worry, we'll talk about in a second, it's also a way that I can give some reminders to my students so that they can be successful. I said out loud that students should always read the title, but perhaps this is something that I've told them in class as sort of a step in their assignment. So I clicked on text and I can just type in here, remember, always read the title, right? And so I can reiterate something that I want them to always be thinking about when they are engaging in this kind of assessment activity. Now I can, as you saw, I made the font bigger. I can add a background color. I can add a border, right? I can turn this on its side, and then I can click done. Down at the bottom in the editor, I can see that this orange, maybe it's pink, speech bubble has popped up on top of my video, and that's going to tell me how long this is staying on the screen. So if I want that to stay a little bit shorter, just flash up and disappear, I can grab this handle and squeeze that. If I want it to stay a little bit longer, I can stretch it out. I actually think we had it about perfect. So I'll leave it just like that. These are all of the different things that you can do with the editor. We're not going to do all of them right now, but I am going to show you an exciting one in just a second. So let's talk about actually getting evidence from this video. One of the ways we can do that is by adding some think time or work time into our videos. So students sometimes when they're watching videos become passive participants. And so we really want to make sure that we're giving them jobs to do during these videos. So what I'm going to do here is click cut, and I've created a break in my video. So now it's split into these two separate clips. Then I'm going to go to add media on the right side and choose this title. And that's going to give me this title card in the middle of my video. I'm going to go here and delete what's written there now in favor of writing something of my own. Right? I've asked my students to identify whether the text is fiction or nonfiction. Here, I haven't really indicated whether they need to write that down somewhere or just think about it, but you could certainly ask that as well. I'm going to drag this out to give them a little more time to think. Each of these longer lines is 5 seconds, so I've given them about 30 seconds to think about this question, okay? So now I can actually gather some evidence about how well my students are understanding this read aloud without having to speak to them directly, right? Whether that means that they're engaging in that self-assessment process of, do I really even know whether this is fiction or nonfiction? Am I really even equipped to make those kinds of calls? Or if I'm asking them to write it down and this becomes assessment evidence for me as their teacher, right? Any questions about that? Cool. So I did mention that this is either going to be sort of them self-assessing or me having to collect their papers and or talk to them to find out sort of what evidence I might gather from their thought process. The other thing I can do, though, is add these interactive questions and actually get a better idea sort of in real time in a format that I can manipulate of what they understand. So when I'm done, I'm going to export this back to Screencastify so I can add some interactive questions to it. Give it just a couple of seconds to process here. So when you're exporting something from the editor, you can export it either to your computer or back to Screencastify. If you export it back to Screencastify, one of the benefits is that you can actually paste the watch page link and share it out before it's even quite done processing, right? So you'll notice that it's taking a second to there we go. That it'll say copy the link, and so you can share that out before it's done. Now, here I am back in the video management page. Notice the title of this one is export. This is the exported version with that question that I just added in. But remember, I can actually add a question in that will give me real-time data. So I'll click interactive questions. And maybe I want to ask that same question, but I want to give students the opportunity to actually answer it. So notice I'm trying to find the right spot, and that's because the student experience will be that the video actually pauses and the question pops up. So I want to make sure that I'm choosing a spot that makes sense to enter this question. Cool. Right here feels good. Add the question. What is the genre of this text? Right now we offer only multiple choice, so you can put as few as 2 answer choices and up to 4. And you choose the correct one and click save. Now notice I can hover over this and see the question. Now, if you want to add other questions, you can most certainly do that. So I can start here and say, who's probably not a main character in this story? And see how my students would reason about this one, and then click save. Now, again, I can hover over and see what it says. And so that will start to become a more useful tool. As you add more questions, you can see what you asked at any given point. There's also the list view where the questions are listed out. You can edit them or delete them at your leisure. When you feel satisfied, you can either click share here and choose either of these options, or you can go back to your video management page and use any of these sharing apps, and you'll be able to include the questions that you just added. I'm going to choose show share settings here so that I can show you some of what we can customize when we share out. But I'll pause really quickly in case there are questions in the chat box. All right. Thanks, John. You're my anchor here. All right, y'all. So I can click anyone with the link here and I can make some customization, I can customize it, right? So anyone with the link, I can change this to private or click anyone in my organization, and then I can add specific domains that I want to access. And then I can actually track who views the videos. So I can require folks to log in with a Google account or enter a nickname to see the video. I'll choose nickname and click save. I'm going to paste this in the chat box and ask you guys to help me out by clicking on it. But I will also just quickly show you what happens or what should happen when you do that. So when you click on the link, you should see this screen that says enter nickname. You'll enter your first name and last initial. You do want to norm that with kids or else they will write Boogeyman or Candyman or something crazy like that. And you click continue. And then you can view the video. Okay. Notice that the questions are in there. I can't get ahead of the question. You see, I get an error message. So I have to jump over and answer it. It'll tell me right away what the right answer is, and then I can keep watching, or I can just jump straight to the next question if I want. Okay. On your side of things, if I refresh this, I'll see who my favorite people are. Just kidding. I like all of you. When I click on viewers, I can see everyone's names here, the most recent view and the number of views. This is really, really helpful when I'm trying to collect data on who's viewing these videos and how they're engaging with them, right? If I click on interactive questions here, then I have this response tab where I can see folks' answers, right? So this is really great because this data we can actually manipulate. And what I mean by that is that if I'm like, John, wow, I'm really kind of surprised he got 100. I can click on his name and see all of his answers, right? Obviously got 100, so they're all correct. If I'm like, wow, this was a really challenging question. I wonder if everyone else did well on it. I can click on that and see the distribution of answers. So I can start to see trends in wrong answer choices. I can think about things like parent-teacher conferences when I look at student level scores. I can think about things like small groupings and reteach when I'm looking at these question level scores, right? So again, some really helpful data that we can gather from looking at that. All right, I'm going to stop here, and now it's your turn to share with me. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. You can drop them in the chat box. But I'm also curious if you have any ideas. Are any light bulbs going off? Are you seeing ways that this might exist in your classroom with the subjects that you teach? Please let me know so that I can steal your ideas and tell them to other people. I'll give you a couple seconds, and then I will talk to you about students demonstrating their learning.
If I may, I'm looking at the Screencastify video and it tracks certain pieces. Can it track like engagement? So for sure we can see the 2 questions that were there, but how do you know the kid watched the whole video?
So we don't have a mechanism right now to know whether kids have watched the whole video. The best solution that I found to that is placing the questions in sort of strategic moments throughout the video. So not having one question at the very end, because as you could see, I can just fast forward to the question and answer it, but sort of thinking about where it might make sense to include questions so that students at least have to engage in certain pieces along the way. They obviously can still click each question and just answer it if they want, but they're less likely to get the score that they're looking for, and you're at least able to see through those like patterns there how engaged they were. I will say at the end of today's session, I'll share out a survey, and if that's something that you would find really helpful, definitely make note of it so I can share it with the engineers.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I kind of did a course already with Screencastify, back at the start of the year. I was at a different school, different teaching assignment. So you're fantastic. The presentation was great so far. It's a really, really good refresher. It's such an easy tool once you get into it. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, John. Making my job easy. All right, y'all. So let's talk about students demonstrating their learning. My y'all gives me away as an American Southerner, doesn't it? Oops. It's my Atlanta speaking. All right. So the first thing I want to say is that video can be a really awesome backstage pass into student thinking, right? Again, I was a math teacher for many years. And so my mantra for many of those years was show your work. And in a way, video takes that and goes to the next level because now students can talk me through their procedure and really explain to me their thinking in a way that historically was only available to me in sort of that conferencing shoulder to shoulder time with kids. Now I can get that when they're doing their homework at home, when they're in small groups in class, right? As long as they're creating these videos, I can see more of how they're arriving at the conclusions as opposed to just their answers on the paper. Having students apply their learning. So I think that sometimes we think of video as like a remediation tool, especially when teachers are creating videos. But I think one thing that's really exciting is that you can use it as an extension tool. You can have students take you on virtual tours of things. You could have students explain things to you. You could have students teach other kids how to do things, right? So when I say apply their learning, I'm really thinking about that application piece when we think about sort of the hierarchy of what students are learning. And the students that have really internalized the content that we're teaching can then take it and apply it and create really dynamic videos of the things that they're doing. All right, y'all, this is one of my favorites. Creating a video discussion board. I think that what is telling is that I'm in grad school and I'm doing all these discussion boards all the time. And if I'm being honest, I absolutely love my classmates. They are brilliant, brilliant folks, but I'm tired of reading paragraphs and paragraphs about what they think. And so video is a really cool way to still engage in that dialogue and discussion, because obviously it's a really important way for people to learn and to build in these learning experiences. But we create a little bit more interactivity, a little bit more relationship building, a little bit more personality when we do it with videos. So what we've done here is ask students a question. They've created these videos and we've put all of the videos in a folder on Google Drive. And so now we can share the folder and students can check out one another's videos, and we can either have a fully virtual discussion where they leave each other comments and that sort of thing, or we can have it sort of be like a flipped classroom moment where they come to class having listened to other people's arguments, and then we can really engage in the dialogue piece of it, right? Not in the sort of like monologue, soliloquy, tell the audience what I think, but now the debate portion, the discussion portion is more front and center, because they come in and can say, "Hey, Julie, I watched your video and I don't really disagree. I don't really agree with your point about X," right? And so the discussion can be really, really rich, even if you're just using it, this online version, to fuel the in-class version. A place for students to present. So I have listed out some things here, but I think that one of the things that I find this most useful for is for those quote unquote non-core subjects. So for foreign languages, where we really need to hear students speak the language orally, we can have them give these video presentations, and also it gives them some confidence. Right now, all of a sudden, they know that they can pause the recording. They can start the recording over. And so they're building up this confidence in public speaking where they may not have had it before, right? Same thing I would say for subjects like music or physical education, where we've been asking students to complete performance tasks as a measure of assessment. And historically, that's eaten up our entire class time for an entire week while we get all the assessments done. And now we have sort of an external way that they can engage with those same tasks, because we're not throwing the tasks out, they're good tasks, but without eating into our instructional time. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second in case there are other questions, and then I will tell you quickly about what Screencastify Submit. But before I do that, I will give you guys some time actually to play around. because in full transparency, you guys are on the free version of Submit. Everything I'm going to show you, you'll still be able to do, but I want you to get a chance to play around with record and edit because I think that those are probably going to be the primary tools that you guys are using. So what I'll do here is find my little handout real quick. I'll send you this handout that should tell you how to download and install Screencastify, just in case you don't know already or have it ready. And then I'll give you about 6 minutes to play around. All right. Any questions before we head off to our 6 minutes? So I just dropped in the chat, those of you that said you didn't know what it was or just don't know how to find it on your computer. So that should give you some pretty thorough instructions for getting that installed. Everyone else and those folks too, hopefully. I'll see you back at, I'm 3:22 Eastern time now, so I'll be back in 6 minutes at 28. Hopefully at least all right, I'll give you 29 because the clock just switched. right, y'all. Hate to do this to you, but go ahead and start to wrap up your creation of videos. I usually make a preemptive apology, which I failed to do this time around just because I know that we didn't have a ton of time to play around, but I have a couple more things I want to say to you before we head out. So hopefully you got some time. Again, I'll give you my email so that if you are encountering issues after we leave today, you can email me about them. If you have questions, suggestions, ideas, etc. In that same vein, any questions that came up as you guys were playing around on your own? Cool. All righty. Well, my question to you guys, and it's really not to you guys because I'm going to lob you the answer also, is this the end of the assessment process? And I want to be really clear in saying no, because all we've done so far is give the kids the assessment, right? We haven't done anything with it. So our students need feedback. We got to make adjustments to our teaching practice, and our students have to get involved in the process, meaning that they need a chance to sort of act on that feedback, whether that means reiterating something to us or trying something again. Okay. So let's talk specifically about feedback. So in order to do that, I'm going to stop presenting my screen and I'm going to do a couple of things here. Cool. So I am going to pull up a student. It's going to be myself. Spoiler alert. I'm going to hop over here to interactive questions. And I'm going to look at this first question, right? The first question said, what was the genre of the text? And I got it wrong because I said nonfiction. So I'm going to really quickly, and I'm not going to talk through all the tools because we've already done that, just record a quick video of me giving a little bit of feedback, in this case, to myself. Hey, Olivia, I'm so excited about the progress that you've been making in reading. I want to talk really quickly about your identification of genre here. So I think there are a couple of things that you can use in order to make sure that you get the genre right. And I'm actually going to go ahead and stop my recording. And I'm going to jump over to my story and make a new recording and say, so when you're thinking about genre, I'll point out a couple of things. The first thing that I want you to do is make sure that you always check out the title. It's going to give you a hint about it might give you a hint about what genre you're working with. If there are any photographs or drawings, you should look at those. Remember that photographs are going to be indications of nonfiction a lot of times, and drawings will be indications of fiction. And then you'll want to give the text a quick scan. Do you see any dates that might indicate nonfiction, any dialogue that might indicate fiction? So again, those are the three things that I think you should make sure you're looking at: the title, any images that are there, and a quick scan of the text to help you identify the genre. And I'll click stop here. And if I jump over, and my editor has been acting a little funny, so this may or may not work, but if I jump over to the editor, one thing that I want to point out is that this add media button, we can actually import videos. So I could actually combine these two videos together in the editor. We'll see if it works. Boom, okay. And then this one, which is called story example. Stick that in there. Boom. right? And so now I've combined these two videos and created some feedback. The one other thing that I want to point out here is that I have a bunch of other students' names on the screen that I really don't want this student to be looking at while I'm giving the feedback. And this is one great way to use the blur tool. So I'm actually going to blur out this part of the screen and up the intensity of that blur. I'm going to add a new blur and blur out the pie chart and add another blur here and blur out this piece. And if I want to just be safe, I can even blur out this stuff at the bottom so that really all they're seeing, or I'm seeing since it's me, is my own score there, right? And then click done. So now in this, again, I can stretch this out so that that stays true for the whole video. And then if I play it through reading, I want to talk really quickly about your identification of genre here. So I think there are a couple of things that you can use in order to make sure that you get the genre right. And I'm actually gonna, so when you're thinking about genre, I'll point out a couple of, right? And so now that student has the feedback that they can operationalize and, do better on that the next time. So a couple things to note there. One is combining videos and the other one is that blur tool. That is all I have for you today. I'd love to know if you have any takeaways, any thoughts, ideas, questions. But other than that, I'll go ahead and drop the survey link in the chat box so that you guys can fill that out. And then I'll stick around for about 9 or so more minutes here to answer any questions that you might have.
Olivia, how long have you been working with this tool?
How long have I been working? Since about June of last year.
So in your experience, because I mean you've been in a number of different spaces, I don't think that it's a super hard tool to get familiar with and to become for sure competent. Maybe certainly not always expert, but it's just a really relatively simple resource. Would you say that that's a fair assessment?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm probably biased because I use it so much, but I really do think, I'll be honest in telling you that I was not like the tech savvy teacher when I was a teacher. And so I was the person that was like, can't we just do it with paper and pencil? And Screencastify has really converted me just with ease of use of, I can do some of those same things and make them more exciting. And I don't feel like I'm sort of struggling through the process of getting something created.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we're always supposed to sort of start where kids are at. And the older you get, the more painful that is, unless you choose not to make it painful. With TikTok and phones and all these other pieces, I think sadly, we're losing some ground on basic literacy skills because kids aren't reading, and what they're reading is not formal or as robust with the language it's being used. But tools like this certainly can bring them in, and they add such a powerful piece to extend what you are trying to achieve in the classroom, because kids get excited about it. I mean, they're not excited about my story about growing up on the farm anymore. Little House on the Prairie is a show, they can watch it, right? So they don't.
Yeah.
But thanks for the presentation and putting it out there, and thank you to Bernice, because there's a lot of room for this to make a huge impact in classes. So.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you for having your camera on, and thank you for Bernice too for being my anchors here. I definitely think you're absolutely right, and I think one thing that we don't highlight enough probably is the link between video and writing. I've seen some educators do some really awesome things with students verbalizing their ideas through video and then using that to help them create outlines and write papers. So for those students, which I mean, it's just getting worse and worse to how averse kids are to writing. They might write one sentence when you're asking for an answer to a question. And so video is a really great way. They're going to talk for 2 minutes straight, and then they can pull out the important pieces and write them. So I thought using video as sort of like a pre-write was a really genius way to sort of like you're saying, John, bridge the gap between what it is that they're already doing in their daily lives and what we want them to do academically.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Olivia. I'm going to stop recording now. But if there's any other questions